Book 2, The Mechanism of Creation. Prologue. The silence after a battle is deceptive. It brings no peace, only a ringing warning of a new storm. Mark stood by the window, feeling the echoes of the victory over the Void Weaver. The city below shone with billions of lights, each one someone's life, someone's unfulfilled contract. Lika was asleep, her mind, finally free from others' thoughts, was a quiet lake. Artem and Victor, without saying a word, had stayed the night. Their energy, raw and calm, created a solid shield around the apartment. It seemed everything had settled. The first big job was done. They were a family. They were whole. It was in this moment of perfect peace that the wall in front of Mark breathed. It wasn't a metaphor. The drywall swelled like lungs and, with a dull, squelching sound, spat a lump of wet darkness onto the parquet floor. It was the size of a fist, distorted and pulsating, like a black heart. It emitted no pain, no hatred, no fear, only an absolute, lifeless void. The same as the Void Weavers, but older, more finished. Before Mark could react, the lump spread across the floor like a liquid shadow and evaporated, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and static. Where it had fallen lay a sheet of paper rolled into a tube, not shimmering like the contracts from the antechamber, but simple, yellowed, as if torn from an old notebook. Mark's heart sank. He recognized this feeling, the feeling of a new contract. But this one was alien. He unrolled the sheet. There was no emblem, no clauses, no conditions. Just one sentence, written in the familiar, cramped handwriting of the keeper. They know not what they do. Stop those who play God, ignorant of the rules of his game. Your next lesson, the mechanism. And below, in the very corner, someone had drawn a simple schematic in inkblot, a cylinder, a piston, and an arrow showing movement. The schematic resembled a part from a steam engine, a mechanism. In the next room, Lika cried out from a sudden pain. A foreign, distorted thought, full of mania and grandeur, pierced her consciousness like a needle. I am the cause. I am the source. Mark clenched the paper in his fist. Peace was an illusion. Their peace was merely a pause between the beats in a symphony that someone had started playing, not knowing the notes. The game had begun. At stake was no longer just one soul, but the very fabric of reality, being torn apart by those who had found matches by accident but could not see the fire. Chapter 1. The Principle of Corruption. The investigation began with silence, not the kind that heals, but the kind that foretells illness. The Southern Gardens district greeted them with an unnatural stillness. Birds didn't sing. Dogs didn't bark. The air was thick and sweetish, like spoiled honey. It's not just quiet here, Lika whispered, shivering. It's forgotten. As if someone took and erased all desires, all impulses. Only the background remains. Mark nodded. He felt the same. A normal city district was pierced by millions of microscopic desires and intentions. I want coffee. I'm afraid of being late. I love her. Here, there was a vacuum. The same emptiness as the Void Weavers, but not absorbing, replacing. Someone had swapped the living, breathing fabric of reality for a lifeless counterfeit. Look, Artem said hoarsely, pointing to a playground. The sand in the sandbox was perfectly clean, without a single footprint. The swings rocked with a monotonous, pendulum-like precision, as if pushed by an invisible ghostly hand. But the creepiest thing was in the middle, a castle made of bright plastic. Its walls were deformed, as if held over a fire for a long time. Through the melted windows, a distorted, nightmarish cartoon landscape was visible. It's not broken. Victor approached, peering with his usual grim concentration for danger. It's different. Someone really wanted it to be a cool and scary castle, and the world obeyed. Literally. That's when they saw it. Not a person, a shadow. It detached itself from the garage wall, having no source or form. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was a living, pulsating blackness. the same one that had crawled out of Mark's wall. It flowed onto the asphalt like thick oil and crawled towards the very same deformed castle. It's that lump, Licker exhaled. Only bigger. The shadow, reaching the plastic structure, didn't flow around it, but began to absorb into it. The distorted castle began to darken before their eyes, its colors fading as if the object was bleaching in the sun over several seconds. A moment later, only a faded, translucent skeleton remained, resembling a photograph burned onto film. It doesn't destroy, Mark stated with icy calm. It absorbs the intention, sucks out the very creative force that created it, leaving only an empty form. The shadow, having finished its work, receded from the discolored plastic and crawled further, towards the entrance of a 5-story building. It didn't react to them, as if they were invisible. Its target was different. It's going to the source, Mark said sharply. It's like a leukocyte, trying to destroy an infection. Only the infection is someone's uncontrolled consciousness. They rushed after the shadow, bypassing the discolored patches of asphalt where the grass had turned gray and brittle, and the fence metal had become fragile as ash. The door to the entrance was ajar. Inside, it smelled of ozone and something bitter, like burnt wires. They went up to the second floor. The door to one of the apartments was wide open. In the living room, a young guy was squatting. He was pale and trembling, staring at a wall covered in diagrams and formulas. In the center of this chaos hung that very schematic drawing of a piston that Mark had seen in the keeper's message. The guy was muttering something under his breath, clutching an old notebook in a plastic-covered binding: "I am the cause. I am the source. It has to work. It has to." He wasn't shouting. He was praying, and his quiet, frantic whisper was more terrifying than any scream. And on the opposite wall, right over his diagrams, the same shadow was already crawling. This time, its movement was purposeful and threatening. It was reaching for the guy, to absorb him. "He doesn't see it," Licker whispered. "He's too absorbed in himself. He is the source of the corruption," said Victor. "But this thing, it will kill him, suck everything out of him." Mark looked at the shadow, at the guy, at his notebook. He understood. A direct attack was useless. They needed to apply the mechanism. Now. Licker, revision. Find the moment in his past where he first distorted everything. Rewrite that code. Artem, anchor. Hold the image of this guy. Healthy, calm, not obsessed. Give him a point of assembly. Victor, drown him out. With your silence. This shadow reacts to the noise of his psyche. Make it so it has nothing to react to. The shadow was a centimeter from the guy's leg. The air hummed like a taut string. Their first battle for the mechanism of creation was beginning. Chapter 2. A whisper in the static. "Victor, now," Mark commanded, but his voice held not alarm, but concentration. Victor took a step forward, between the obsessed guy and the approaching shadow. He didn't assume a fighting stance. He closed his eyes. His powerful aura, once torn by hatred, collapsed into a perfectly smooth, impenetrable sphere. He wasn't fighting the chaos. He ceased to be part of it. He entered the silence. The effect was instantaneous and strange. The shadow, almost touching the guy's leg, slowed its movement, as if disoriented. Its pulsation became rarer, more uncertain. It felt its target, the distorted intention, but the signal seemed to be jammed. "It's working." Artem exhaled, feeling the tension vibrating air in the room clear slightly. "Licker, your turn," Mark said, not taking his eyes off the shadow. Licker crouched, trying not to look at the frightening blackness. She closed her eyes and immersed herself in the guy's energy stream. It was like diving into a boiling cauldron. Shreds of images, formulas, manic delight, and animal fear. She was looking for the root, the first distortion, and she found it. Not a complex calculation, but a simple, childish resentment. The guy had been humiliated at work, called a loser, and he leafing through his grandfather engineer's old notebook, came across a diagram, and in despair, with rage, he whispered, "I am not a loser. I am a creator." At that moment, something clicked. The mechanism, dormant within him, activated. Holding. Artem hissed through clenched teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Holding the image of a healthy, happy person in his mind while looking at his obsessed, distorted face was like trying to hold a burning coal in the air. Faster. Lika, having found that moment, didn't analyze it. She did what Mark had taught her. Revision. She mentally inserted herself into that scene of humiliation. But instead of letting the guy fall into a rage, she imagined him looking at his offender with regret. How he takes the notebook not with fury, but with curiosity. How he opens it and sees not a magical artifact, but a memory of his grandfather, and smiles. In reality, the guy on the floor shuddered violently. His muttering stopped. Confusion flashed in his eyes for a second, then bewilderment. The notebook fell from his weakened fingers. At the same moment, the shadow, having lost its target, stopped. It stood in place, pulsating, and then began to slowly retreat, dissolving into the wall it had emerged from, leaving behind only a light ripple in the air. Silence fell. Real, not dead. The guy, named Alexei, came to his senses, sobbing from exhaustion and a relief he himself didn't understand. Bam. First plot line: the notebook. While Artem and Victor conned Alexei, Mark picked up the notebook. It was old, engineering style. On the first page was neatly written, "My thoughts on the nature of force. Engineer Petrov." The pages were filled not only with formulas, but also with philosophical reflections, very close to Neville's teachings, but translated into the language of mechanics and kinematics. Petrov had intuitively understood the laws of consciousness and tried to describe them as a mechanism of creation. The last pages were covered with notes by Alexei, attempts to calculate love, success, respect. Bam. Second plot line: the conspiracy. When they exited the building, a surprise awaited them. A short, dapper man in sunglasses with darkened lenses stood by their car. "Conduit Mark." He smiled, and his smile was too flawless to be sincere. "My name is Kastian. I represent the organization Logos. We have been observing your activities, and we are impressed." "What organization?" Mark became wary, feeling a strange, polished to a shine energy signal from the stranger. There wasn't a single extra emotion in it. "We are those who have long mastered the mechanism." Kastian made an elegant gesture with his hand. "We do not cripple reality, like this unfortunate soul. We correct it. Bring order. We need people like you. Strong, but inexperienced. We can teach." "Teach what?" Lika asked, feeling an icy wave emanating from Kastian. "To teach that creation is not therapy." His voice became quieter and harder. "It is responsibility. And sometimes, to fix a complex mechanism, you need to break off an interfering part. Think about it. We will find you." He turned and left, leaving them in a state of new, much more dangerous shock. They were not the only ones who knew about the mechanism, and their competitors viewed reality as a machine requiring maintenance. And Mark's phone vibrated again in his pocket. No number. A message with one phrase: "Do not trust Logos. They do not fix. They cut off." Chapter 3. A cog for the machine. The notebook of Engineer Petrov lay on the table in their new apartment, like a time bomb. Every page was both a key and a trap. "Look." Mark ran his finger over a schematic drawing depicting a man, from whose heart threads stretched to surrounding objects. He calls this the principle of resonant assembly. We don't just desire. We emit a frequency, and reality is a receiver that tunes into it. Like a radio, Lika nodded. Alexei was emitting a signal of self-hatred and fear, and the world answered him with ugliness and emptiness. And this shadow, Artem looked gloomily at the wall it had emerged from. Is that what it is? Anti-resonance? A noise suppressor? Worse, Victor joined the conversation. He sat, staring absently out the window. In the silence I felt its intention. It doesn't just jam. It erases. Like an eraser. It returns the canvas of reality to its original, zero state. Without distortions, but also without life. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp, anxious call. It was Alexei's mother. Her voice trembled. He's missing. He went out to the store an hour ago and didn't come back. And some man called, asking about him. His voice was like a robot's. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. Logos. They had come for the interfering part. Bam. First direct confrontation. They rushed to Alexei's district. On the way, Mark tried to tune into him, but felt only a vague veil of fear and a cold, polished presence. Kashin's presence. They found Alexei in a deserted square near his home. He stood, leaning against a tree, his face a frozen mask of horror. Kashin stood before him. He didn't threaten, didn't shout. He simply spoke. His words were quiet, sharp needles entering directly into the consciousness. You are a glitch, Alexei Petrov. Your life is a series of errors. Your existence introduces disharmony, but it can be fixed. Just admit it. Admit that you are superfluous, and all your pains, all your fears, will disappear. From Kashin emanated the same dead, sterile emptiness they had felt in the shadow. He wasn't distorting reality. He was offering to renounce it. Completely. He's erasing him. Licker cried out. Just like the shadow. Mark acted instantly. He didn't attack Kashin. He focused on Alexei, on the image Artem was holding. He sent him an impulse, short and clear as a hammer blow. You are needed. Your thoughts are important. Alexei shuddered as if waking from a nightmare. His eyes cleared. Kashin turned his head. His darkened glasses were aimed at Mark. In vain conduit. You are interfering with the machine's work. Rusty cogs must be replaced. He made a slight gesture with his hand, and the space around them froze. The sounds of the city died down. The leaves on the trees hung motionless. They found themselves in a bubble of absolute stasis, created by the cold will of Logos. Did he stop time? Artem whispered, feeling his own strength fading in this icy void. No, Mark said with difficulty, feeling monstrous pressure. He stopped us. Our intentions. Our ability to create. He drove us into a state of inaction. Kashin impassively took a small device, resembling a laser pointer, from his pocket. Don't worry. It doesn't hurt. You will simply cease to be a problem. At that moment, from behind Kashin's back, from the very wall of the frozen square, the shadow emerged. But this time its movement was not slow and uncertain, but swift and purposeful. It didn't touch Alexei or the team. It fell upon Kashin. He turned sharply, and for the first time, irritation flickered across his perfectly calm face. Annoying bug. He hissed. The shadow enveloped him, but didn't absorb him. It compressed into a dense, black cocoon, from which a growing hum was heard. The stasis bubble shuddered and burst. The sounds of the city returned. When the shadow dissipated, Kashin was gone. On the ground lay his card with the logo a stylized image of a gear with a blazing eye inside. And next to it another scrap of paper from the same yellow paper as the first message. It said, "He is not human. He is a program. Find the engineer." Chapter 4. Ghost in the Machine. The notebook of engineer Petrov turned out to be not a collection of theories, but a diary of despair and epiphanies. His name was Gleb Petrov, and he was a brilliant design engineer at a secret plant Zenit in the 1970s. Turning the yellowed pages was like descending into madness. Drawings of pistons and gears gradually gave way to blueprints of the human soul. Look. Mark ran his finger over a complex diagram where the heart was depicted as a combustion chamber, and the brain as a control unit. He didn't just believe in the power of thought. He saw consciousness as a quantum engine. Thought is the spark, he wrote. Faith is the fuel, and the image is the blueprint of the finished part. Petrov tried to create a machine capable of materializing thoughts. And, judging by the last entries, he succeeded. Task Protocol No. 7. Object: a glass of water. Operator: myself. Image: hot tea. Result: success. Water temperature is 98 C, but side effect: the room is filled with steam. The walls are wet. It feels as if reality thinks through the image, adding logical consequences. Danger. Protocol No. 12. Object: forming a Obrukov. Image: his dismissal. Result: catastrophe. Obrukov is not just dismissed. He has vanished. No one remembers him. No one except me. The mechanism doesn't just execute. It erases contradictions. It is too literal. I did not create a god. I created an idiot genie. The last entry was written in a trembling hand. They found out. Logos will come for me. They see it as a weapon. I must hide the mechanism. I will rewrite my own memory. Become someone they won't look for. Just an old, crazy engineer. If you are reading this, find the mirror. It is the key. It will show the difference between creation and nightmare. My God, Licker whispered. He wasn't just a theorist. He created a device and erased himself to hide it. Logos is not just an organization, Victor concluded grimly. They are the heirs of that very Soviet project. They are the ones who came for Petrov, and they are still looking for his mechanism. At that moment, the pages of the notebook suddenly glowed with a soft blue light. The diagram stirred, rearranging into a new image: a city map with an old abandoned plant marked on it. It was Zenit. Petrov's mechanism itself was pointing the way. Chapter 5. Cogs of flesh. The Zenit plant was a ghost town. Rusty workshops stretched into the darkness, and the air smelled of scale and century-old dust. But not only that, it smells of them here, Artem said, clenching his fists. Kastian, that dead sterility. They walked through the main workshop, illuminating the path with flashlights. Suddenly, figures emerged from the darkness. 3 men and a woman, dressed in identical gray suits. Their faces were absolutely impassive, and their eyes looked with the same expression of cold assessment. Cassian stood at the head. The notebook, he said in the same lifeless voice. And your decision to join Logos. The final offer. We will not be part of your machine, Mark replied. Error, said the female agent. Her lips twisted into a semblance of a smile. You are already cogs, just defective ones. They moved forward. But this was no ordinary fight. Agent No. One looked at Artem and simply said, your strength is an illusion. Artem, about to lunge, suddenly staggered, feeling a terrible weakness. His muscles seemed to go numb. This wasn't a psi attack. It was the immediate, literal embodiment of a word into reality. Agent No. 2 pointed at Licker. You are death. And the world for Licker plunged into absolute silence. She couldn't even hear her own heartbeat. Victor tried to enter the silence, but Agent No. 3 parried. There is no silence here. And Victor felt his mind filling with a deafening, unbearable hum. They were not fighting people. They were fighting living decrees, walking statements that changed the reality around them. Kastian looked at Mark. You are the main glitch. Your existence disrupts the balance. Time to make adjustments. Mark felt his consciousness being squeezed in a vice. He tried to imagine a connection with his friends, but his mental shields crumbled to dust before this absolute, machine-like will. And then from the shadow behind Kastian emerged. The shadow. But this time it was not amorphous. It took shape: a tall man in a cloak with a hood. Its outlines trembled, but there was clarity and intention in them. Enough a voice sounded, coming not from their ears, but directly from their minds. It was quiet, but full of immeasurable power. The Shadow Man raised his hand. The logo's agents froze, as if their intentions had simply been switched off. Engineer, Cassian hissed, and for the first time, his voice held not simulation, but genuine rage. I am not the engineer, the voice answered. I am his first mistake, the first bug he failed to erase. I am what remains when you erase a personality. I am the memory of reality. And you introduced too much noise. The Shadow Man turned to Mark. Petrov hid the mirror not here. He hid it in the only place logos cannot reach. In the antechamber. Find the white hall. Find its blueprint. Having said this, the ghost of reality dissolved, and the logo's agents, like unplugged robots, collapsed to the floor. All except Cassian. He looked at Mark with icy hatred. This is not the end, Conduit. This is only the beginning of maintenance. And he disappeared into the darkness. Mark, still trembling from the encounter with the soulless force of logos, understood now they faced the most dangerous journey. To return to where it all began. To the White Hall. To steal the blueprint from the Keeper himself. Chapter 6. The Architect of Oblivion to return to the antechamber. The thought was both insane and the only correct one. But how? The gates between worlds do not open by desire. A key was needed, or a colossal energy discharge. The idea came to Mark in the form of a quiet nightmare. He stood on the very spot in his apartment where the shadow had first seeped into their reality. The wall was clean, but the memory of the pulsating blackness burned his gaze. We will not look for a door, he said, turning to the team. Licker, Artem, and Victor looked at him with readiness, a shadow of fear for what lay ahead in the depths of their eyes. We will burn a hole. With what? Artem asked hoarsely. We don't have Petrov's mechanism. There is something stronger. Mark looked at Licker, then at Victor. Petrov's mechanism is a tool, and a tool requires an operator. Its power was in focus, in the purity of intention. Logos perverted it, turning it into a weapon. What if we used the same power, but not for creation, but for a summons? We will summon the antechamber itself here. That's like trying to pull the ocean into a glass. Licker shook her head. It will tear us apart. Not us. Mark's gaze became sharp as a blade. The reality around us. We will create a point of supertension, a place where the fabric of existence thins to the limit. And then the Keeper will be forced to appear, to patch the hole. The plan was monstrous and genius. They decided not to break down the door. They decided to set the house on fire to call the firefighters. The place for the ritual was that very abandoned workshop of the Zenit plant. The echo of Petrov's experiments still lingered in its walls, making them a perfect resonator. They stood in a circle in the center of the huge room where miracles had once been attempted. Artem, whose rage was a dynamo machine. Licker, whose consciousness was an antenna. Victor, whose silence was an impenetrable shield. And Mark the conduit, who had to weave their energies into a single superconducting cable. Remember, his voice sounded loud in the tomb-like silence of the workshop. We do not seek power. We seek an alliance. We call to the architect. Concentrate on the image of the White Hall, on the silence, on the Keeper. They closed their eyes. Artem imagined his strength not as a fist, but as a support, a column going into infinity. Licker filtered out all the noises of the world, leaving only the purest signal of longing for that timeless peace. Victor immersed himself in his silence, becoming a vacuum sucking in all the chaotic energy of the world. And Mark did the most difficult thing. He imagined connection, not to someone specific. He imagined a web connecting every soul in the city, every thought, every hope and pain. He took this colossal energy flow and, like an engineer, redirected it to one point, into their circle. The air sparkled, first like a heat haze over asphalt. Then sparks crawled along the rusty beams, not burning them, but making them vibrate at an unthinkable frequency. The sound grew not a roar, but a low-frequency hum emanating from space itself. The glass roofs of the workshop cracked, covered with a web of fractures. And then the whiteness came. It didn't gush in a stream. It seeped, like water through wet paper, first in spots on the floor, on the walls. Then these spots began to spread, merge, devouring rust and gloom. The smell of scale was replaced by that familiar scent eternity, smelling of old stars and the freshness of the first rain. Within seconds, they were standing not in a workshop, but in the familiar white void. They had done it. They had drilled a tunnel straight into the heart of existence. But the antechamber was not as Mark remembered it. It trembled. Dark streaks floated in the whiteness, like ink in water. The air vibrated with anxiety. The figure of the keeper materialized before them. His ivory-colored suit was impeccable, but on his usually imperturbable face was tension. "This is reckless, conduit." His voice sounded tired. "You disrupt the balance. The balance is already disrupted." "Keeper," Mark stepped forward. "Logos. They create chaos. They erase souls. You must help us." "Must?" Distant quasars flashed in the keeper's eyes. "I am the architect of oblivion and memory. I am not a judge or a savior. I am a librarian. And you are readers who started a fire in the reading room to find one book. A book that can stop those who tear out the pages." Licker interjected. "Petrov, the engineer, his mechanism, his mirror. You must know about it." The keeper froze. His gaze became detached, as if he were flipping through the infinite catalogues of the universe. "Gleb Petrov," he finally uttered. "A soul with a unique karmic imprint. Engineer-creator. His contract, understanding of the fundamental laws of being, he fulfilled it too well." He looked behind the scenes and saw the mechanism, and, like a child, reached for the switch. The keeper made a light gesture, and an image emerged from the whiteness, a gray-haired man in work clothes, with burning eyes, sitting at a table with instruments. His soul was withdrawn from the cycle after the incident. The keeper's voice was even. "For its reassessment, it is located here." Mark felt his breath catch. "Release him. Give him to us. Him and his blueprints." "Impossible. His knowledge is too dangerous. It is already loose." Atom exploded. "Logos uses its fragments to break the world. Maybe it's better to give the weapon to those who will protect it." A heavy pause hung in the antechamber. The whiteness around shuddered again, and this time Cashin's face flickered in it, distorted by fury and determination. "They found your trace," the keeper stated indifferently. "Even here, their will is algorithmic and relentless. They are like a virus." He looked at Mark, and in his gaze was something new, not fatigue, but calculation. "Perhaps you are right. Sometimes, to treat a disease, a dangerous medicine is required. I will give you Petrov and his blueprints. But know this, you are taking into your hands not only the key to salvation, you are taking into your hands responsibility for all of existence. One wrong step, and the mechanism of creation will become the mechanism of apocalypse." The keeper raised his hand, and a silhouette began to manifest in the center of the white hall, first transparent, like a ghost, then denser. It was him, Gleb Petrov. His eyes were closed, and his face expressed the peace of non-existence. Next to him hovered a complex, multi-dimensional holographic blueprint. The mirror, a device capable of showing the true essence of any intention. The battle for existence was moving to a new level. Now they had the creator of the weapon, and the weapon itself. All that remained was to learn how to use it, before Logos erased from reality the very memory of their existence. Chapter 7. The mirror of intention. The silence of the white hole exploded, not with sound, but with light. The holographic blueprint of the mirror unfolded before them like a cosmic nebula, giving birth to stars. It was not just a schematic, it was a symphony frozen in form. Intertwinings of energy channels resembled neural networks, crystal lattices, and quantum processor diagrams simultaneously. In the center of the construction, a sphere glowed, inside which light pulsated, changing color from crimson to sky blue. Nearby, slowly opening his eyes, stood Gleb Petrov. He looked exactly like the image from the keeper's memory, disheveled gray hair, intelligent, piercing eyes, in which a mixture of genius and inexhaustible fatigue was frozen. He looked at his work, at the blueprint, and there was no pride in his gaze. There was horror. "I didn't want this," his voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't used it for decades. "I just wanted to understand, to see the framework of the world." Mark took a step forward, cautiously, as towards a wild animal. "Gleb Petrov, we are here to help. Your invention, Logos, is using it to cripple reality." The engineer slowly shifted his gaze to Mark, then to the others. His gaze slid over Lika, and she felt an icy pricker sensation, as if someone had read not her thoughts, but the very structure of her soul. "Logos," he uttered this word with bitter contempt. "Rats. They found fragments. Primitive, wretched protocols. They use my mechanism as a battering ram, as a sledgehammer. They don't understand. They are holding a scalpel. Teach us," Mark said simply. "Teach us how to use it, to stop them." Petrov looked at the mirror again. He seemed to be having a silent dialogue with his own creation, the mechanism of creation. He began, and his words gained the strength and confidence of a scientist explaining a fundamental law. It does not create something from nothing. That is a delusion. It manifests. Everything already exists. Every possible reality, every event, every object, they exist as potential in a single field of infinite probabilities. Understand? He looked at them, and the fire of insight that had once led him to ruin burned in his eyes. Our consciousness is not a creator. It is an operator, a navigator. It selects one probability from an infinite multitude and focuses it, makes it real for itself. The mirror, he pointed to the pulsating sphere in the center of the blueprint, is a tool that allows one to see the very map of probabilities, to see one's current position on it, and to move to another point, so, to change reality. Lika asked, mesmerized. "No." Petrov sharply cut her off, and the echo of his cry rolled through the whiteness. "Not change. Relocate. Imagine that reality is an infinite forest. You are standing on one path. Around you millions of others, invisible to you. Logos takes an axe and chops down the forest to lay its ugly, straight road. They rape the probability field. And the mirror. It allows you to simply see a neighboring path and step onto it. Without destruction. Without violence." He approached the hologram and poked his finger into a complex knot of lines. "Here is the initiation block. It reads your deep, true intention. Not what you suggested to yourself, not a selfish whim, but what you truly are, your quintessence. The mirror reflects it. And here." His finger moved to another part of the schematic, the converter. "It translates this intention into a command for the probability field. A command not to create, but to manifest. And how does that work in practice?" Victor asked, his practical mind seeking specifics. Petrov turned to him. "Suppose you want to heal a person. Logos will take and erase the illness. But illness is part of the system. Erase it, get a new imbalance. The mirror will show you countless versions of this person. In one, he is ill. In another, healthy. In a third, he never encountered the virus at all. You choose the reality where he is healthy. You focus on it, and the mirror helps you and him to step into it smoothly, without ruptures. So, to fix something, you need not fight it, but find a reality where it doesn't exist and transition into it." Mark summarized, feeling a grand, new picture of the world forming in his mind. "Exactly," Petrov nodded. "Struggle is an acknowledgement of the power of what you are fighting. It strengthens the undesirable probability. and acceptance and redirection. That is the only way. But for this, absolute clarity of intention is needed. The slightest falsity, doubt, selfish motive, and the mirror will reflect the wrong path to you. You will step into a nightmare you created for yourself. He fell silent, looking at his hands. I realized this too late. My first test. I wanted tea, but deep down, I wanted to prove my genius. And the mirror. It manifested not just tea. It manifested the consequences of my vanity steam, condensation. A universe where my discovery had already happened and had consequences. Artem whistled. So, to stop logos, we need not fight them, but find a reality where they don't exist. No, Petrov shook his head. They have inscribed themselves too deeply into the probability field. Their path has become a wide, paved highway. Simply stepping aside won't work. We need to make their road impossible. Return the forest to its place. How? Mark and Licker asked in unison. The engineer turned back to the blueprint. His face was illuminated by grim determination. The mirror can not only relocate, it can close probabilities, make them inaccessible for navigation. We must create an immune response. We will find the root probability from which logos began its existence, and we will seal it. We will not destroy them. We will make it so they could never become what they became. They will simply crumble, like a house of cards from which the main card has been pulled. The plan was grand, frightening, and brilliant. They were not going to kill the enemy. They were going to erase the very possibility of its appearance. For this, Petrov looked at the keeper, who had been observing them in silence all this time. We will need more than a blueprint. We will need the mirror itself. And we will need to enter the very heart of logos, their source of power. The place where they conduct the probabilities of this world. The keeper slowly nodded. It seemed he had already made a decision. The mirror was hidden in a place where probabilities collide and cancel each other out. In the heart of chaos. Only one whose intention is absolutely pure can reach it. The slightest impurity, and the chaos will consume you. Mark looked around at his team Licker, Artem, Victor, and now Gleb Petrov. They were a strange team. A conduit, an empath, a warrior, a guardian, and a genius madman. But their intention was pure. They wanted to save the world, not conquer it. We are ready, Mark said. And there was not a shadow of doubt in his voice. The battle for reality was entering its decisive phase. They held the map. Now they had to find the hidden treasure and win a war that should never have been. Chapter 8. The Heart of Chaos. The keeper called this place the Heart of Chaos. But when the portal from the White Hall closed behind them, Mark realized no word could describe it. They stood nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. There was no up or down, no familiar laws of physics. Space was an infinite kaleidoscope of overlapping realities. In one layer, fiery rain fell on a city of black obsidian. In another, giant, intelligent flowers sang in a chorus in the language of light. In a third, the very void vibrated with a symphony of incomprehensible geometry. All this existed at once, merging and disintegrating, being born and dying in every instant. Do not move. Petrov's voice was barely audible in the deafening roar of the universe. There is no support here. The only support is your intention. One wrong step, and you will be torn apart by contradictory probabilities. Licker whimpered in pain, covering her ears. Her gift, always her guide, here became a curse. She heard not just thoughts, she heard the whisper of billions of universes, tearing her mind apart. I can't. It's too loud here. She fell to her knees, her consciousness clouding. Victor reacted instantly. He knelt beside her, put a hand on her shoulder, and entered the silence. But this time he did something more. He didn't just shield himself from the chaos. He became a quiet harbor in its very center. He stretched his shield, covering Licker. The noise subsided, turning into a distant hum. Licker breathed a sigh of relief, her eyes clearing. "Thank you," she whispered. "Look," Artem pointed somewhere deep into the kaleidoscope. His gaze, accustomed to physical confrontation, clung to any point of support. "Over there. Seems stable." He was right. In the epicenter of this madness hung a single immobile object, a small platform made of matte, non-reflective metal. On it stood an object from which even, clear circles radiated, momentarily ordering the chaos around. It was the mirror. It was not a mirror in the usual sense. It was a perfect black cube. Its faces were so smooth and dark that the gaze seemed to fall into them, losing depth and perspective. "How do we get to it?" Artem asked. "I can't fly." "One does not fly here," Petrov said. "One intends. Concentrate on the mirror, not on taking it, but on being next to it. Your desire will become a bridge." Mark closed his eyes, cutting off the madness around him. He imagined the mirror, not as an artifact of power, but as a key to healing, a key to correcting a mistake. His desire was pure and clear. He felt the space around him begin to condense, forming a sort of path. He took a step, and his foot stepped onto an invisible but sturdy bridge of concentrated will. The others followed. Artem walked, clenching the image of the mirror in his mind as the ultimate goal of his path, an anchor in this madness. Victor, without breaking his silence, led Licker by the hand, who, having recovered, now helped him, subtly tuning into the stable signal of the cube and amplifying it for everyone. Finally, they stepped onto the platform. Chaos raged around, but here a strange, unnatural silence reigned. Petrov approached the cube and touched its surface with reverence. "It sleeps, awaits a command." "How do we use it?" Mark asked. "We don't use, we ask a question." Petrov turned to them. His face was serious. "The mirror will show us the root probability of logos, the very first path from which it all began. But be prepared. We will see not just history. We will see an idea. The idea of control, absolute, total order. And it is seductive. It will try to consume us, convince us that this is the only true path." He looked at each of them, and his gaze was heavy as lead. "If even one of us falters, the mirror will not just show us the probability, it will transport us into it, and we will become the first agents of logos, by our own hands." Mark nodded, understanding the full risk. They stood around the cube, placing their hands on its cold, inert surface. "Concentrate," Petrov commanded. "Question the origin of logos. The first probability, nothing happened. For a second, two, then." The blackness of the cube shuddered. It didn't disappear, but became transparent. But transparent not into emptiness, but into something. They weren't looking into a mirror, they were looking through it, into a mind. An image appeared before them, not a picture, but pure information poured directly into their consciousness. The Soviet Union, the 1960s, the secret laboratory Zenit. Not Petrov, another man, thin, with eyes burning with fanatical fire. He sits over blueprints, but these are not schematics of mechanisms. These are social matrices, equations of control. He does not want to understand the world. He wants to fix it, make it perfect, predictable. He reads the same works as Petrov, but sees in them not insight, but an instruction. He is Anatoly Svetlov, the founder. His intention is flawlessly pure in its fanaticism, and absolutely destructive. Order at any cost, happiness through control. The images rushed faster. First successes, first corrections of undesirable elements who simply vanished from reality. The birth of the first agent, not a human, but an embodied dogma. Growth, expansion. Logos penetrated governments, corporations, the very fabric of society, invisibly ruling the world, trimming all protruding shoots. And with the images came a feeling, a staggering, seductive feeling of peace. Everything was in its place. There was no pain, no chaos, no agonizing choice. There was only a clear, well-oiled mechanism, and they could become part of it. Eternal, perfect cogs. Mark felt his mind beginning to yield. It was so easy. Next to him, Artem shook his head violently, his muscles bulging from the strain. No. He rasped. This is not strength. This is cowardice. Lika was crying, but her tears were tears of fury. She felt millions of stifled, erased voices, millions of unlived lives sacrificed to this order. Victor stood motionless, his silence becoming a fortress into which foreign ideas could not penetrate. And Petrov looked at the creation of his antipode with icy horror. Now I see, he whispered. I saw the mechanism, and he saw the goal, and that turned out to be more terrible. The mirror, having received their collective, resistance-purified answer, produced a result. A single point shown in the center of the visualization, a coordinate, not in space, but in the very fabric of probabilities. That very moment, that very first thought of Anatoly Svetlov, that gave Logos life. We found it, Mark said, his voice firm. Now we know where to go. They removed their hands. The image disappeared. The black cube became inert again. Now what? Lika asked, wiping her tears. Do we go into the past? No, Petrov shook his head. We go to the headquarters, where Logos keeps its own distorted version of the mechanism, the staple, a device that doesn't navigate probabilities, but forcibly carves its own tunnels through them. It is through it that they control their agents and make edits to reality. We will infiltrate it, connect the mirror to the staple, and seal the original probability right through their own system. They themselves will become the instrument of their own destruction. The plan was audacious, almost suicidal. To go into the very lair of the enemy, possessing the power to rewrite reality. Mark took the mirror. It was surprisingly light. Then we don't waste time. Keeper, open the way for us. The space around them wavered again. The white hole appeared to become a springboard for their final, decisive leap. The final battle for the soul of reality was beginning. Chapter 9. The staple, the path the Keeper opened, was not a portal, but a fall through the layers of reality. The sensation was akin to falling into icy water that becomes hotter and thicker with every moment. Their bodies didn't move, but myriads of worlds rushed through them, leaving for a brief instant the sensation of alien landscapes, familiar streets, or pure mathematical abstractions. And then the fall stopped. They stood in complete, absolute darkness. There was no sound, no smell, not the slightest source of light. This was not the darkness of night or a cave. This was darkness as the negation of the very concept of existence. Where are we? Lika asked quietly, almost soundlessly. Her voice had no echo, it was absorbed by the void. In the inter-realm, Petrov answered just as quietly. His figure was barely discernible in the pitch blackness, in a buffer that Logos created between reality and the probability field. There are no laws here, only their will. Suddenly, a single light source ignited in the darkness, distant, cold, and flickering, like a lone star in airless space. But as their eyes adjusted, they realized it wasn't a star. It was a city of light, floating in the void. Its architecture was unnaturally perfect, consisting of strict geometric forms, cubes, pyramids, spheres, connected by straight, arrow-like bridge transitions. Nothing superfluous, not a single curve, not a single ornament. Sterile, mathematical perfection, frozen in space. This was the headquarters of Logos, their citadel. The staple must be in the center, Petrov said. In the main structure. Looks like a giant press. He was right. In the very heart of the city of light hovered a colossal construction. Two massive, perfectly polished slabs, positioned horizontally one above the other. Between them pulsated a clot of pure energy, riddled with shimmering lines as if someone had clamped the very map of probabilities in a vice. From this staple, ray channels radiated in all directions, disappearing into the darkness, control threads linking it to agents across all realities. How do we get there? Artem skeptically examined the perfect chasms between the structures. Nowhere to hide. We are already detected, Victor stated indifferently. From the city of light, dots rushed towards them. Dozens, hundreds, Logos agents. They flew without violating the impeccable geometry of their formation, like a swarm of perfect machines. Petrov, Mark said sharply, handing him the mirror. Your task is to reach the staple and connect it. We'll cover you. You don't understand. Panic sounded in the engineer's voice for the first time. They won't fight. They will simply rewrite you. The first echelon of agents approached. They didn't strike. They simply focused. The space around Artem compressed. The air thickened, turning into a transparent but incredibly strong crystal. They were trying to freeze him, remove him from the equation like an incorrect variable. Think it's not there? Mark shouted. It's an illusion. Artem, with a face distorted by effort, growled. He didn't try to shatter the crystal with muscular strength. He imagined it wasn't there, that his fist was moving along a pure, unhindered trajectory. He imagined himself free, and the crystal shuddered. A crack ran across its perfect surface. This was not physical force. It was the force of will clashing with another will. At the same time, a different kind of attack fell upon Lika. Thousands of voices flooded her mind, but these were not voices of pain or fear. They were voices of flawless, irrefutable logic, proofs of her uselessness, her weakness, her status as a glitch. They tried not to break her, but to convince her to self-destruct. No, she cried, covering her ears, which was useless. She turned to her gift, not as a shield, but as a tool of understanding. She felt not malice in these voices, but emptiness, absolute, programmable emptiness. And she sent back not anger, but pity. A simple, human impulse of compassion for that which had never known life. The logical constructs in her mind crackled, unable to withstand this irrational, living energy. Victor became their anchor. The agents tried to convince him that his silence was weakness, that true strength lay in action, in control. But Victor had been through too much. He knew the price of both strength and silence. He simply was. His imperturbability became an impregnable rock against which mental attacks shattered. Mark became the coordinator. He felt every strain of his friend's will, every attack from the enemy. He was the conduit. He didn't attack himself, but amplified them. He directed the purity of Artem's intention to shatter the crystalline traps. He helped Lika stabilize her empathic shield. He was the cement holding their defense together. Petrov, go! He shouted, seeing the engineer, clutching the mirror to his chest, making his way along one of the ray channels leading to the staple. The agents, seeing his target, threw their main force at Petrov. The space in front of him began to fold, trying to cut off his path. And then something happened that no one expected. From the darkness, from the very void of the inter-realm, the shadow emerged. But this time it was enormous. It enveloped the group of attacking agents, and they simply disappeared. Not dissolved, but were erased, like a pencil sketch. The ghost of reality had entered the battle. It fought not for them. It fought against the distortion, against those who mutilated the memory of the world. This gave Petrov precious seconds. He reached the base of the staple, a giant platform riddled with pulsating light veins. Without hesitation, he applied the black cube of the mirror to one of them. The mirror came to life. Its matte surface flared with a dazzling white light. The light ran along the veins of the staple, flooding it with an unnatural, living radiance. The perfect pressed slabs shuddered. The energy clot between them seethed. Connected, Petrov shouted. The mirror is scanning the system, looking for the root probability. The entire city of light plunged into chaos. The sleek geometric forms swam and distorted. The agents lost their coordination, their movements becoming sharp, uncoordinated. The control of Logos was failing. But then, from the very depths of the central structure, a figure appeared. Tall, ascetic, Anatoly Svetlov. Neither old nor young. His face was a mask of cold, indifferent fury. In his hand was an object resembling a scepter, a clot of the same dead light as the city. Dilettante. His voice sounded in their minds like the grinding of metal. You play with fire, not understanding its nature. He raised the scepter. And all the space of the interrealm, all this artificial void, compressed around them with one single goal: to crush. This was not an attack on the mind. It was an attack on their very right to exist. Mark felt his connection to reality beginning to tear. They were losing. Svetlov's strength, fueled by the full power of the staple, was too great. And at that moment, the mirror finally found what it was looking for. Before them, right in space, that very root probability unfolded. Svetlov's first thought. And the mirror didn't just show it, it offered a choice. Erase or heal. The final decision was theirs. Chapter 10. A different path finale. The pressure was monstrous. It felt as if the very void had grabbed them by the throats, squeezing out the last drops of will. Anatoly Svetlov stood motionless, his scepter the point around which all the destructive power of Logos crystallized. He was not just a man. He was an embodied dogma, an idea devouring all other ideas. Erase. A thought, pure and clear as a bell strike, sounded in Mark's mind. It was the voice of the ghost of reality. He is a cancerous tumor on the body of being. Delete. The temptation was enormous. One click, one decision. And this nightmare, this machine for suppressing all living things, would disappear forever. Mark looked at his friends. Artem, with a face distorted by effort, but with an unbroken fire in his eyes. Liquor, exhausted, but still emitting waves of compassion even for these soulless agents. Victor, whose silence was the last bastion against the chaos. And Petrov, who looked at his creation, the mirror, with hope and horror. And Mark understood. To erase would mean to admit that Logos was right. That some paths are so erroneous that they must be destroyed. It would be the same control, just with a different sign. No, he mentally shouted back to the ghost. We will not be like them. We will not erase. He transferred all his consciousness, all his will to the mirror. He did not send a command of destruction. He sent a question, a request. Show us the path where he understood, where he saw not the goal, but the beauty of the mechanism itself. The mirror, connected to the staple, roared. Its white light became blinding, eclipsing the dead city of Logos. The energy clot between the staple's slabs exploded in a kaleidoscope of images. They saw the young Anatoly Svetlov again. The same laboratory, the same blueprints, but this time, he was looking not at control equations. With admiration, he traced his finger over a diagram of the probability field, secretly brought by his colleague, Petrov. His eyes burned not with fanaticism, but with curiosity. He saw not an order to be imposed. He saw a harmony to be understood. The mirror was showing not a fiction. It was showing a real, but unrealized, probability. That very moment of choice that had once occurred in Svetlov's heart. And this image, this lost possibility, the mirror directed straight into the consciousness of the present Svetlov. The unimaginable happened. Anatoly Svetlov trembled. His scepter fell from his weakened hand and dissolved into the void. The pressure crushing the team vanished. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. An inhuman sound, a mixture of a sob and relief, escaped his throat. He looked at the projected image, at himself, young, full of a thirst for knowledge, not power. What have I done? His voice, always a lifeless instrument, was now full of genuine, animal horror. All those lives, all those worlds, I wanted to make them better. You wanted to control them, Mark said quietly, approaching him. Not to understand. The city of light around them began to change. The strict geometric forms softened, alive, iridescent colors running across them, straight lines curved, turning into arches and domes. The perfect, dead order gave way to a complex, breathing harmony. The logo's agents froze in place, their programmable emptiness filling with something new: confusion, awareness, memory. Logos was not being destroyed. It was being healed, rewritten from within, returned to its original, pure potential, the thirst for knowledge, not control. Svetlov raised his eyes, filled with tears, to Mark. "Fix this," he whispered. "Please, fix it." Petrov, without a word, nodded. His fingers slid over the interface of the mirror, now fully subordinated to the staple. He did not erase. He made corrections. Like a skilled restorer, he returned to the world what had been taken from it. He found the probabilities erased by logos' lives, destinies, entire worlds, and carefully returned them to the map of being. It was not a quick victory. It was a titanic, painstaking labor. But with each correction, the world around them became brighter, deeper, richer. The ghost of reality, watching this, slowly shook his head. His form, once a clot of rage and pain, began to lighten, become more transparent. Unexpected, his voice sounded, and there was no longer any anger in it. There was weariness and hope. "You did not destroy the disease. You found an antidote for it. Perhaps this is the right path." He looked at Mark. "The memory of the world will remember this, and you conduit." Having said this, the ghost finally dissolved, but this time not as a fugitive, but as a guardian whose mission was finally accomplished. Mark helped Svetlov to his feet. He was broken, but a spark burned in his eyes, the very one he had seen in the image from the mirror. The spark of a real, living person. The work was finished. The staple, once a tool of suppression, now pulsed quietly, synchronizing with the natural rhythm of the universe. Logos ceased to exist as a threat. It became something else, perhaps a guardian. They stood in the transformed inter-realm, which now more resembled the antechamber of something grand and beautiful. "What now?" Licker asked, looking at Mark. He smiled, tiredly, but with a deep, abiding calm now. "We go home. Our work is only beginning. There are other diseases and other ways to treat them." He looked at the mirror in Petrov's hands, at the transformed Svetlov, at his friends. They held in their hands not a weapon. They held in their hands a key to infinity, and they were going to use it correctly. Epilogue. Several months passed. The world hadn't changed drastically for ordinary people, but for those who could feel, it had become lighter. The oppressive burden of invisible tyranny had disappeared. An air of freedom lingered. Mark, Licker, Artem, and Victor returned to their lives, but it was a different life now. They no longer just reacted to threats. They became teachers, a center where those who had accidentally, or by the call of their soul, discovered the gift of navigating probabilities gathered. They taught them not strength, but understanding, not control, but harmony. Petrov and Svetlov, former antipodes, now worked together in a refurbished laboratory, studying the mirror and helping to correct the consequences of past mistakes. One evening, Mark stood on the balcony of their shared apartment. The city glittered below. He felt millions of connections, millions of nascent possibilities. He was a conduit. He was connection. The door creaked quietly. Licker came out to him and silently hugged him. Then Artem joined them, placing his powerful paw on their shoulders. From the living room came Victor's calm voice, explaining something to a new student. They were a family. They were whole. And in their hands was the whole world, not as property, but as an infinite garden to be tenderly cultivated. And somewhere deep in his soul, Mark knew their greatest adventures were still ahead. End of Book 2. The Conduit. The Mechanism of Creation.